Hey guys, Matt from Eastwood over here in my home garage, and today what we're going to do is work on removing some rust so I can multitask. So I have a 32 Ford project that I've been working on this winter where I've been tearing down the old frame, doing some repairs, having things blasting some stuff myself, and I'm trying to juggle a bunch of things at once to really move quickly with this project over the winter. So one of the things with multitasking is if I can use Eastwood Rust Dissolver to take rust off of some of these smaller parts while I'm working on some other things, it frees me up from having to blast each of these little individual things in my blast cabinet, and I get a bunch done. So we're going to be doing a bunch of things for this car, and then also grabbed a couple other things that I had laying around that were items that I got with another car that were actually new old stock parts. These were brand new old Ford parts that sat on the seat of a car that got damp in a damp building, and they have just a ton of surface rust on them. So like these old kingpins that are actually new old stock, the box like dissolved around them, and they are not pitted really bad, but they have a bunch of surface rust on them. And I have a stack of these, but we're just going to show you guys one of them today. Is this old Lincoln backing plate here. It looks really crusty, but I think once we take off all this ugly rust with the rust dissolver, it's going to come out pretty good. So I'm going to pour the rust dissolver into my little tub here, get that filled up, and then I'm actually going to pour or scoop some of the rust dissolver into this and put some of the small parts in here and let it sit down in there. Then it'll be easier to actually pick it up and take it out and check on our parts as we go. So we're going to get to filling up our tub here with rust dissolver and get this stuff soaking. Alright, so I threw all the little parts in, and they're already starting to soak and work, but these larger parts like this, or something that has like this flaky rust on it where we can actually like pick it off with our fingernail that's sitting on there, the rust dissolver will work into there and get that stuff off, but it generally just takes a little bit longer and you end up brushing it off. What it'll do is it'll soak in and it'll kind of loosen this stuff even more, that it kind of falls off, and you just brush it off with like a gloved hand, or even with a with a brush anyways. So I prefer to just really quickly wire brush this. Alright, so this has been sitting for a couple hours now, and the parts, I could see that the rust dissolver is working, because you start to see it actually bubbling a little bit as it's kind of working here. And like I'm taking some of these small parts out here, and I can already see, just wiping my hand over it, it's actually you can start to see the original black paint on the parts as you pull it out of there, and you just kind of rub your hand over it. So it's taking that off. It just kind of muddies the rust, just kind of turns into mud water when you rub it, so sometimes it's kind of hard to see. So some of these bigger parts I'll pull out of here, and same thing on this. It's actually, you can actually see some of the original black paint. So I'm gonna pull a couple of these pieces out here, and then we'll wipe it off and show you guys what they look like after a couple hours of de-rusting here. And then we'll flip over that backing plate here. Alright, so here's what I do. I just got a closer angle here to show you guys. So I usually use like either a wire brush or plastic bristle brush, and then a lot of times I'll use some pre as well. It starts while there's still some of the rust dissolver on it, and just kind of go over part just to check, because sometimes this rust it'll look like the rust is still on there, but it's literally just like the rust dissolver is, there's so much rust in there, it starts to kind of change the color of it. So you can see just hitting that really quick, and then let's clean the part off quick here. Just do a check. So you can see this part is, you know, we got pretty clean metal there. There's some spots right here on the top where it probably was sitting in the tub, you know, resting on the bottom of the tub. So we'll leave that side up and submerged this time. But you can see like this piece here is nearly all de-rusted. There's a little bit on the edge. So that one should be pretty good pretty quickly. And wasn't as bad as it looked. Now some of these shock arms, they were kind of rusty, but again, I found if you just kind of go over each part real quick, just do a little rinse, brush and rinse, it speeds the process up. Also, the temperature in your shop or of the product will also help too. It's a little cooler in my shop, around about 65 degrees. So it's not, if it's working on a 90-degree day, you know, this stuff will definitely works quicker. Or you can put a little heater, you know, you could heat your rust dissolver and it will work a little better. So, all right, so this was one of the ones that was like really rusty, and we could see already, you know, all up in here. This is where you can actually see the line where it was sitting. I had it flipped only on one half. So you could see here, this top half, it's black original paint, and then a lot of the rust came off. We just have a little bit in this pitted area here. That's still a little bit of rust, but not too bad. Same with the front side. It's, you know, it actually shows some of the paint is still there, and we're getting nice clean metal that's starting to come up. So that's not too bad for maybe 2 hours total in there. This kingpin is pretty much good on a lot of it. There's just a couple spots like we were talking about in the beginning that I didn't knock off that scaly rust. So the rust dissolver can't get in there and underneath of that to work it. It's got to work from the top. So that's going to take longer unless you help it along a little bit. So probably what I'll do is I'll get a little pick and just knock those little scaly bits off that I missed, and the rest of it should start looking like this pretty quickly. So you can see this thing was all covered in surface rust, and the majority of it is really clean other than these couple spots right there. So, so I'm going to clean off all these parts, do the same thing, kind of rinse them just to do a spot check, see where we're at, and put them back in and let them sit for a little longer. All right, so next let's check on this backing plate that I put in here that was really rusty. And we could see this thing is really starting to, the rust dissolver is starting to do its deal. You can just see the rust is just like literally running off in sections in here. And you can see the bare metal and there's just rust just running off the backside. Same thing, it's really, you can really see how well it's working because it's just, I mean, we got rust just like literally, you can see it just pulling off of here. And that's why I like to use this brush to kind of just work in the areas where the rust dissolver can't get in real good, or can't get in as well because there's maybe some buildup. And simply just kind of go over it lightly. Like there's a little bit here where it's just still built up, you know, flaky rust that I didn't actually knock off that well. So that stuff's starting to fall off, but if you knock that stuff off, it comes off way easier as it sits in there, so knock any of that off. Now this thing looks all muddy, but if we take a dunk in the tank real quick, let me just, so I know it looks really bad now, but that's actually just all the rust that we're kind of breaking free and it's dissolving, turning to mud as I'm kind of knocking this stuff off. But there we go. All right. it's all muddy. Put it back in the tank here and just kind of give it a wash, if you will. Take my rag so you can see what's going on here. Okay, you can see just like the mud water, but here I'll just do a quick wipe just to kind of do a check. So you can see a good bit of the backing plate is actually already bare metal. Now once we're cleaning it off here, you can see like all of that is all bare metal, but you can see here there's just some more of that flaky rust, and that's what I'm talking about. Like the rust dissolver will get to it eventually, but if you knock it off as you go, I'll have a little metal scraper over there. I'll just knock some of this flaky rust off. Then you can put it back in and it makes it go a little quicker. But you can see that the majority of it is all taken care of. It's just these flaky spots that are still have a little bit of rust on them because the rust dissolver didn't knock it off or get underneath of there fully. So I'm gonna hit this with the wire brush and the scraper a little bit, put it back in. You can see the front side here, it's the same thing's happening where it's just knocking it all off. So give it a little abrasion with a brush, put it back in, and I would imagine here if we let this stuff sit overnight, we should be pretty good. But it's, you know, in part of a day, it's already doing pretty good. But I'm gonna let it sit overnight just so I don't have to do too much mechanical removal of this. But we should have some pretty clean parts in the morning. Alright, so these parts sat overnight, and I think a lot of these parts are pretty much ready to go. I took a little peek when we walked in the shop here. Most of them look pretty good. That backing plate, I'm not quite sure how that's going to look because that is the one that we had to keep kind of knocking that real heavy flaky stuff off of. But I know a lot of these smaller parts are pretty good, so I'm going to start pulling some of them out. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I used this little bowl here to keep some of the smaller parts in, and I'm going to pour the rust dissolver off, and you can see what's left in the bottom here. And take some of these parts out. They're looking real good. Really, there's just probably residual loose rust that's on them that's just from floating around in this nonsense. But there's that. These are all spring shackles. Have a little bit of paint left on them, but they're all really clean. I'm going to pour some more of the liquid off. And what you can see is this is all the rust that it actually dissolved and knocked off of the parts there. So you can see down in the bottom there's all this rust that just fell off. So that was just off of these little parts here that sat in this little bowl. That was all the rust that was in there. So that tells us it's doing its thing, even though we know the parts are already clean. So yeah, these are all real good. So those can come out. We'll just hit them with some pre and fast etch to get them all sealed up. Got a shock arm here. Oh, that looks great. That shock arm came out really nice. That thing doesn't really need any brushing. It's just like fresh, clean, nice metal. So we'll put that down on our pig mat here. Alright, so these kingpins were really bad, and they came out really good. So a nice thing with the rust dissolver is that it doesn't, like media blasting, it's going to actually profile the surface. So with these kingpins, you want them to still be pretty smooth. So these ones that there isn't really any pitting on from the rust, and it was just kind of sitting on top, we can probably use these again because, like I said, they were new old stock. They just sat in damp boxes. So that one looks really good. You can still see they're still kind of got that polished look to them. So this one's also looking pretty good. You can see the areas that are a little like dark on it where the rust was sitting, but all the rust is gone. That's probably very light pitting maybe that was in the metal, but nothing that I can really even feel with my hands. So these are looking real good. So all these kingpins can come out. That one's good too. Same thing. Good. Yep, that has just a little bit at the top there, but I think it's just stuff that was just, didn't hit it with the brush. Here we go. Another one. That looks great. A little bit at the edge there where it was probably sitting against the edge of the tub, but you know, it came right off with the brush. There's probably a lot of rust in the bottom of this, like I showed you in that bowl. There's probably a ton in the bottom of this bin, so some of the rust I'm seeing on these bottom edges might actually just be all the rust that fell off everything. Dang, got a lot of kingpins in here. Yep, this one's pretty good. It's all good there. Fish around. Another one. All right, oh, these came out great. This is a steering column clamp. There's a little bit of black paint that's left on it, but overall it's like fresh, clean, perfectly nice steel. So these came out really, really good. And I'm sure that paint will knock off pretty easily before we paint it. These are shock links. These early Fords, that came out really good. Just a little bit of residual rust from sitting in the bottom of the tank there. That's good. These are really rusty. These were spring clamps that go around the leaf springs in the front. These were like very, very rusty, and they came out really, really good. So I'll give them a little brushing just to get that little bit of leftover rust on, just knocked off. Shock links, or shock arms, these are really good. All right, so now we're ready to check on, I got everything I think fished out of here. So we are ready to check on the backing plate. And holy crap, you can just see the rust that's just literally falling, running off of it. That was like, because I had it sitting down like this, the rust had separated from the metal, but it didn't have anywhere to go. It's kind of trapped. So it's literally like, I got big, just flakes of rust that are just falling off. So that's looking, oh wow, yeah, that's looking really good. Just a little bit down in here. This is just the stuff that I didn't, you know, that's slowly working off, but I think a brush will take most of that out. So what I'm gonna do is, just to make this thing really nice, I'm just gonna scrape this a little bit and leave it in just a tiny bit more. This is just areas where it was really thick and I didn't get it knocked off. So I will get that all one more time with a wire brush and a scraper and get that all cleared. And we should have this thing pretty good. It probably is decent now. I could probably get a lot of it off just with this plastic bristle brush, but I'm gonna go over it, like I said, let it sit just a little bit longer. This was a very, very rough, I mean, this thing was really bad, so I imagine this thing would take a little bit longer. But so I'm gonna get this cleaned off just a little better, let it sit for a couple more hours, and then this thing should be pretty good. I'll get all these other parts all dried off and sealed up so that they are good to go. Alright, so after that last little bit of scrubbing, I let this sit for another hour or so, and we are ready to go. So this thing is looking good now. So other than just some rust that's just clinging on there from floating around in this tub here, we have a lot of just rust flakes from those really heavily rusted parts floating around. So we can just brush this all off here and set it down. But you can see this thing is like fresh steel on here, so there's no big flakes of rust or anything on here. Anything that is floating around is just residual that was floating in the rust dissolver in our bath here. But we can just dry everything off with a rag here, and we are pretty much set to go. So I'm going to do the same thing I did with those small parts. I'm going to dab this all off, probably spray it down with some then I will hit it with some fast etch, and that will seal everything up and give it a nice phosphoric coating so that it won't rust. And then when we're ready to actually use this in our next project, we can just scuff it up, spray it with some primer and chassis black, and we are ready to go. So that is a pretty quick demo on how you can de-rust parts without doing a lot of labor. You can take these parts, put them in the bath, and the best part is, now that I'm done with this bath here with de-rusting these parts, I can take this, put a strainer in my gallon jugs again, and pour this back in carefully, strain off the rust that's on here, and then we'll have it in our jugs. It doesn't go bad. You can just set it on the shelf, and then next time we need to do it, we can do the same thing and de-rust parts in large or small batches. It's all up to you and what you want to de-rust. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you want to learn more about Rust Dissolver or all of our rust products, you can click the link down below, or you can visit eastwood.com to get all the tools you need to do the job right. Thanks guys. Catch you later.